10. Ambushed by a killer croc. Chris Corbelich and Ben Stooksbury were on a vacation kayaking in the Congo when the unimaginable happened back in 2010. They were traveling down the Lukuga River when they caught their friend Hendry Coetzee on video being ripped out of his boat by a massive crocodile. The beast was 15 feet long and came out of the water like a dinosaur. It snatched Hendry straight out of his kayak, dragged him into the water, and he was sadly never seen again. In Chris's own words, he glanced over and, out of the corner of his eye, saw the crocodile come out of the water and bite Hendry's entire left side. These three men were actually world-class seasoned kayakers. They wanted to be the first trio to finish the Lukuga River's white water by kayak. What started off as a brave trip turned quickly into a nightmare. They'd already been avoiding hippos and other wildlife, navigating in a tight group so they wouldn't be attacked. They were only a few feet away from each other when the crocodile set its sights on Hendry. The surviving men didn't know what to do at first. They were stuck in complete shock. They stayed around for a minute, but soon realized there was no way they could help their friend escape from the croc. They paddled downstream to the nearest village, and later Hendry's kayak washed up on shore. His body was never found though, and he's been presumed dead ever since. 9. Bear eats a kayak. In 2015, Mary Maley was kayaking alone somewhere between Ketchikan and Petersburg when she took a break at the US Forest Service cabin located in Berg Bay. The cabin's about 22 miles from Wrangell. She'd just finished carrying her tent and stuff into the cabin to let it dry out when she heard something big moving around nearby. She wanted to go on a hike while waiting for her gear, but the sounds of a lingering beast convinced her otherwise. Then, a bear eventually showed itself. It was a giant creature, and when it started to get close to Mary, she pulled out her pepper spray and sprayed the bear right in the face. It was so angry that it started destroying the woman's kayak. She caught the bear on video smashing the boat. It was so mad about getting blasted in the face that it stomped, clawed, and bit at her kayak until it was unusable. Mary said the attack went on for 10 to 15 minutes before the bear finally gave up and left her alone. Then she found herself stranded in a cabin out in the middle of nowhere with her kayak completely obliterated. Thankfully, a boat happened to be passing by. She was able to ditch her gear, swim out to the boat, and get safely transported back to Wrangell and away from that cranky old bear. 8. Saved by the watch. 2 kayakers were separated off the coast of Sydney back in June 2022, thanks to strong currents and winds. One of them managed to paddle back to shore, but the other was not as lucky. The second kayaker was swept almost 2 miles out into the sea and had to be rescued by a helicopter team. They saved his life, but it was really all thanks to his smartwatch. The kayaker was able to send out a distress signal through his Apple Watch that alerted rescuers exactly where he was. If he hadn't been wearing the watch, he may have drifted way further out to sea and been lost forever. It was a close call. The kayakers went out early in the morning on a Saturday, found themselves separated almost immediately, and the man made the call on his Apple Watch not long after 9 a.m. The Police Marine Area Command quickly located his orange kayak and the kayaker who was struggling to keep the thing upright. He was exhausted from keeping it from tipping over. Helicopter rescuer Nick Pavlakis told a local news station that his kayak had taken on a significant amount of water. The kayaker could barely stay upright and was starting to sink. He was transported to safety around 9:30 that morning, but could have been toast if they were just a few minutes late. 7. Hit by a ferry. It was a hot August day back in 2016 during rush hour when a ferry from New Jersey drove straight into a large group of 10 kayakers, injuring 3 of them. New York City might not love it, but it's one of the most exciting places to kayak in the country. You get a unique view of the city skyline. You can paddle up close by the Statue of Liberty, and there are usually other kayakers nearby to help if you get into trouble. But there's also a lot of boat traffic in the area. Ferries are crossing the river night and day. There are barges, cruise ships, and every kind of boat imaginable. But most of the time, the vessels know how to keep their eyes peeled for groups of kayakers. The accident happened near the West Midtown Ferry Terminal. The ship drove straight through the group, who were being led by a guide named J. Cartagena with the Manhattan Kayak Company. One man was hit so hard that the ferry almost ripped his arm right off. The New York Police Department's harbor unit even said his arm was partially severed. In the investigation that followed the incident, the Coast Guard ruled two primary causes. First was a lack of communication between the kayak and the ferry companies. Secondly, the sun was so bright that it cast a glare into the ferry captain's eye. With the glare blinding him, he didn't even see the kayakers as he rammed into them like they were pins and he was a floating bowling ball. 6. Paddling to Hawaii. Almost. On May 30th, 2014, a 57-year-old man departed from Monterey in a kayak outfitted with a solar panel. The panel was designed to power the electronic systems on his small boat. But why would a kayaker need electronic systems in the first place? It's because this man was trying to paddle all the way from California to Hawaii. That's an incredible distance of 2,400 miles across the open ocean. He got pretty far, paddling for 8 or so days before his solar panel failed and his electronics went completely dead. Realizing he was going to be in huge trouble without his systems, he turned around and decided to go home. But the kayaker had been at sea for a pretty long time already at that point. It was more of a struggle than he'd anticipated. He made a distress call on June 10th after realizing he probably wasn't going to make it back to California by himself. A heavy-duty MH-64 helicopter was sent from Los Angeles to find him. They picked him up 63 miles from Point Conception. The kayaker wasn't injured at all, at least not physically, but his pride definitely took a blow. The Coast Guard said he was lucky to be alive, and that kayaking to Hawaii is dangerous for even the most experienced kayakers. 5. Attack of the Great White. In October 2019, Danny McDaniel and John Chambers were out kayaking near Shiprock off the coast of Catalina Island. They were having a relaxing paddle when suddenly something came up from the depths below. Danny felt something push the side of his boat and thought his friend was messing with him. But seconds later, Danny's kayak was hit by something powerful. It definitely wasn't John playing around. At the same time, both men realized what was happening. There was a humongous great white shark. The kayakers estimated that it was nearly 20 feet long, almost double the size of Danny's measly 9-foot kayak. The shark meant business. It clamped its teeth down on the back of Danny's kayak, narrowly avoiding the man's flesh. It looked like it wanted to eat his kayak, but it didn't. Both men froze up in terror as the great white held onto the boat for a few seconds. Then it loosened its grip and vanished into the murky depths. The kayakers paddled back to shore safely and never saw the beast again. They had nothing to show of the attack except a few puncture marks in the fiberglass of the kayak. 4. Dragged out to sea. A pair of tourists had the worst Thai vacation ever. They went kayaking in Rayong province, but only one of them came out alive. 2 men identified as Lee and Ann went kayaking in September 2022. They traveled to the coast of Rayong with Ann's girlfriend, but she didn't feel like getting in the water that day. When the evening came around, Ann's girlfriend started getting worried. The entire day passed by and the 2 men weren't back yet. So she went to the kayak rental office to tell them what happened, and the tourist police sent out a search boat. But by the time it was dark out, they hadn't found anything. They weren't located until the next morning by a fishing boat. Fishermen came across Ann and Lee, only there was one big problem. Ann was clinging onto Lee's body like a shipwrecked survivor hanging onto a piece of driftwood. He later told the police that he and Lee were swept into the ocean by a massive wave that knocked them both out of their kayak. Lee was fine for a while. The 2 men clung to each other in hopes of getting rescued. But after a few hours, Lee started getting weak. Then he didn't respond anymore, and didn't even know if his friend was dead or not, but he clung to his body the whole night anyway. It was only when the fishing boat arrived that he realized he'd been clinging to the corpse of his friend all night long. 3. Stranded and afraid. Captain Tom Koronek picked up a stranded kayaker who was on the brink of death back in June 2022. Davey Wright went kayaking all by himself on June 27th during a fishing trip, but at some point on the trip, he let someone he met at a sandbar use his kayak for a bit. What Davey didn't realize was that the person who borrowed his kayak damaged it. He didn't know it was broken until it was too late. His tiny ship sank. This left Davey floating off the Florida coast in the middle of the night. He started his journey back to shore around 11 p.m, and that was when the kayak began sinking. He tried to swim back but ran out of energy and wound up treading water in complete darkness on the verge of hypothermia. He spent 5 hours in the water before Captain Tom Koronek coincidentally passed by him. Tom heard Davey screaming and pulled him out from the water, without a doubt saving his life. Davey had nothing to call emergency services on, and he was already close to freezing to death. Another hour more, and he would have been a goner. 2. The Kayak Killer. In 2015, Angelica Grasvold killed her fiancé Vincent Viafore on the Hudson River. Angelica sabotaged Vincent's kayak by taking out a small drain plug designed to stop the kayak from filling up with water. She must have thought she was pretty clever because her plan worked. Vincent took his kayak out, didn't realize the plug was missing, and drowned out there by himself. Angelica tried to say it was an accident and that she removed the drain plug, not understanding it was a safety risk. She spent years denying the accusations, did 3 interviews with People magazine while in jail, and persisted it was all just a big misunderstanding. But it wasn't. Not at all. In 2017, Angelica pleaded guilty to negligent homicide. She allegedly confessed to New York State Police investigators that she was upset with her relationship, so she got rid of Vincent. He'd postponed their wedding and tried to convince Angelica to have relations with him and another woman. She allegedly felt trapped, so she killed him. But after all the years' worth of investigations and after finally pleading guilty, she was released from Bedford Hills Correctional Facility after serving only 2.5 years behind bars. Currently, Angelica is walking as a free woman. 1. Solo in the Everglades. In early 2022, Mark Miel decided to go kayaking by himself in the Florida Everglades. He was last seen on January 22nd heading out for some aquatic adventures. The man was supposed to return to his family in Virginia just 7 days later, but they never heard from him, so he was reported missing. In early February, the police caught a huge break. Park rangers found some of Mark's belongings on the shore of the Lopez River. They located his wallet and phone and used his cell phone data to track his most recent coordinates. The discovery of the phone was a miracle. Mark had logged his coordinates on January 31st, allowing the rescue operators to narrow down his location. Soon after, the aviation unit saw Mark's body near where his phone had washed up. He was still wearing his life jacket, but Mark didn't look too good. The rescuers found him floating face up in the river. Corporal Ed Henderson, one of the men who helped find Mark, said he'd been in the water for almost 2 days. He was dehydrated, hypothermic, and convulsing, but he was still alive. Rescue operators couldn't believe the man had floated through the Everglades like a lost beach ball for days and was still breathing. At 67 years old, Mark Miel survived an incredible disaster. He was rescued and went on to make an amazing recovery. Would you rather get swept out to sea or attacked by a crocodile? Let me know which would be worse in the comments, and thank you for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and come back soon for more cool videos from the channel.